Okay, now I'd like to show you what I like to call the full Photoshop smile design technique. There's a couple ways we can do it, but we'll do it the simple and fastest way, which I think is the most impactful with the patient. We'll show them what it would look like with real teeth changing their smile. Let's go grab this image that we'd closed down from before. And this is the image that we've already aligned with using our lines from before, if you remember the lines from a previous section. So we've rotated the image. We've also aligned the lips on, essentially lips retracted view, what I like to call digital incisal plane. All right, and then we cropped a set of teeth. So that we could be behind. We could actually work on. We're going to work on this image right here, and then show the patient what it looks like with old and new teeth. And hopefully, the whole point of all this is to motivate them to go to the next level. Now, realize that this is just a digital smile design. This doesn't tell us anything about function and biology, and we're going to need to think about all of those things. But it just really should be thought of as a motivational tool. All right, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to need to get rid of her old teeth in one image. I've duplicated the layer with the lips on, so original lips, duplicate lips. So let me show you how I do that. I showed you a different technique before, but this will be very similar to what we talked about before. And in that, we're going to erase these old teeth. Now, there's a couple of ways to do that. The easiest way to do it is to use a selection tool. So I'm going to come up here and select. I'm going to select the polygon lasso tool up here in the upper left-hand corner. Got that. And I'm going to zoom in just a little bit more. So Command or Control plus, and we're going to start and select. All right, now when I select for this technique, what we're going to do is we want to select or start our selection and select just outside, or let's say include a pixel or two of the lips. So we want to make sure that we erase all the gingiva and teeth in this image, anything that's intraoral. All right, so this takes about a minute or so. Sorry for the boring minute. And we're going to come along and select a pixel or two just inside here, and if we don't like that's a little bit too sharp of a transition to back up, I click the delete key and that will get rid of the last point. Alright, so we're coming down here. Now, one of the things I'm going to do on this, we got a little asymmetric smile on her. In other words, her lip moved a little atypically. So I'm just going to erase a little bit of that lip right there to improve when I sort of level out the smile line, that the lip isn't affect, let's say, the patient's perception of what I'm trying to do here. Okay, moving along here. So now I can zoom in like you just saw me do, and then move my mouse or cursor off the page, and it will start to center the image like that. Then I come back here and click again just inside, or capturing a little bit of the lips, or in this case right over here, the cheek, just a little bit, and just setting points as I come around here. Great. Okay, now I'm going to zoom back out, Command or Control 0. There we go. And I think I'll zoom in just a little bit on the Z key, and so you can see what I'm going to do here. All right, so it's not too much. Now, with this layer highlighted, let's look in the upper right. This is the image or layer I want to erase the lips from. I'm going to want to do a couple things first. Let's go back to our selection tool. This has to be highlighted, and then let's click on Refine Edge. I highlighted the polygon lasso tool and brought up this Refine Edge, and you can see where I captured a little bit of the lip down here. Now, what I'll routinely do, just like when I was working on or selecting teeth, I'm going to feather that just a little bit so it blends in. So the typical feather is about 2 pixels, and then smooth it maybe 3, 4, 5 pixels. Okay, click OK. Now, with zoomed in and with this layer highlighted and still selected, what we're going to do is we're going to now erase this, and we will see through there. We're going to cut a digital hole in here, and we'll see this layer 0 we can see that's still up here in the upper right. All right, I'm going to push on the delete key. All right, the delete key, and it just disappears. Okay, so what I've done here is just digitally erased her teeth. So we can now see through to the retracted view. Now, it would have been better if I had a retracted view, ideally, that the teeth would have been separated the same. Okay, that we had a nice separation there, but I didn't get that from the student. And like I said earlier, I wanted to show you one where there was a little bit of problems with the images and I had to fix the images. But ideally, when you take your cheeks retracted view, you should take the same separation here of the teeth. About 2 to 3 millimeters apart is a good thing. All right, so let's delete that again just to show you. Now, I can then move this original lips up on top and click on, off, and you can see that, yeah, there's maybe some slight movement of the teeth, just a little bit, a pixel or two, but not that big of a deal. So if we want to keep that on top as our original, we can. All right, so there's with lips, there's with lips on, and if we take this completely off like that, there's lips off. Turn this back on. Now at this point, I want to deselect. So Command or Control D, great. And we're just going to hit Command 0 so that we've got this image here. And we're going to pull it off to the side just like that. Now we're going to want to bring some teeth in. So we're basically ready to go to start bringing some teeth in from one of our saved files, from our library files. Let me go back here. I think it's over here. Yeah, all right. So this is just a standard file, and I'm going to give you this with a DVD that has teeth that I've selected from before. And you saw this, how to do that earlier. And so what we're going to do here now is we're going to carry these teeth in. All right, now this is sort of the fastest way to do this. I could bring in the lines. Let's go to this image right here. We've got lines. If I wanted to turn on the lines, I got midlines and all those things that we've already done before. We don't need to do that now. I've got tracings. We can turn off the teeth. We can do it with tracings. I find it to be more impactful with teeth, with actual teeth. All right, so what we're going to do now is we're going to, with this image highlighted, we're going to drag these teeth into this image, and they won't be sized perfectly right now. That's okay. We'll take care of that in a minute. So we're going to shrink this image down so it doesn't bother you, and I'm going to grow this image up. Command or Control 0, and then we'll just center it over here. So we just carry the teeth in, all right? And the teeth now, basically we want to put underneath the layer that is with the teeth erased, and then we're going to turn this layer off. So there's on, there's off. All right, now we can see that the teeth are kind of all over the place. I'll just turn this off so you can see, and they're right now the wrong size. That's no problem. All right, so I'm going to zoom in here just a little bit, Command plus, just to zoom a teeny bit and kind of scroll to the center. All right, now with this layer highlighted, it brought in as a layer, but I've got all the teeth individually. I can deal with individually if I want to. And I've already pre-measured these teeth. This is an 80% width to length ratio for the central, 65% of the lateral, and 80% of the canine. The canine is 80% of the lateral. All right, but now let's start sizing these teeth to her face. Now, how do we do that? Okay, we're going to turn on the free transform. It's up here in Edit, Free Transform, or we can do Command or Control T. That's not what's called the hotkey. All right, now we're just going to center this over about where it needs to be, and you can see they're way too big right now. And I will actually do this with the patient in front of me, and I usually get a big laugh about this point, and that's always nice to do to get patients involved. But what we're going to do is size this to her mouth now. So I'm holding down the Shift and Option or Alt, Shift, Option or Alt, and I'm going to drag from this corner over here and start to bring these teeth down to be about what they should be for her. And then I'm still holding down the Option or Alt when I let go of the mouse, so I don't create any distortions. And I'm just grabbing it and centering it. Now that looks about like just a generic set of teeth. All right, now I can zoom in with everything still highlighted, Command or Control Z. I'm zooming in. And now what I can do with this highlighted right here, with this transform still on, I can now make this 50% transparent. So I can see through there, and I can start to see that, ooh, and maybe talking to the patient, they're sitting here, you know, even though you might like that, let's just say they initially like that, this tooth is too far away from the old tooth. All right, this is going to be a little too big, and so we couldn't do this without surgery or orthodontics. It's just too far away. So we'll start, and I'll say, well, let me just show you what I think we can do, because the patient clearly wants bigger teeth. So we're going to kind of center on her teeth right there. I'm looking through right here, and I can see her teeth. And clearly, she's got a gingival problem, right? We're gonna deal with a gummy smile is going to be our biggest thing that we're going to deal with. All right, so that's probably pretty good for initial design. All right, so maybe just shrink it down just a hair. And now you can see that we're off just a little bit over here. We could probably do this lateral, this canine looking through here. And now I can start to distort this if I want to, or I can distort teeth individually. All right, so I think I'll leave this like this, maybe move that midline over just slightly. All right, now let's just say the rotation was off a little bit. I can rotate this so that, and I can turn my lines back on and look at the lines if I wanted to make sure everything's horizontal, because I've already lined up her eyes. Okay, great. Now once I've got a pretty much the way I want, I'm going to apply that by pushing on the Enter key. So there's the Enter key that just applied it. All right, now you can see I've got some little things that maybe we don't want. Maybe we want to do a little more crown lengthening up here. Maybe we want to just change the teeth individually. All right, now I can go back to 100% opaque at this point. Now let's just say you were showing the patient from this view and they said that they did not like that. They said, well, it's just not bright enough talk. Well, you know what we get these days, especially in the United States. I've put in a brightness and a hue saturation layer in here for you. So all you got to do is you just click on this, double click, and that opens up right there. And then you could just go crazy if you wanted to, and obviously you're not going to do something like that. Or maybe they thought it was too bright and you wanted to go down just a little bit, which we don't get too much anymore, but certainly some options with that. So we just brightened or darkened all of the teeth. Okay. If you didn't like the hue or saturation, the patient says, well, there's, this is too much color. Well, you can take the color down too, the saturation down. So I've already put that in there for you. All right, now at any point in time, I can zoom back out and look at the full face. But let's go now and work on the individual teeth for just a second. So I'm going to make this translucent again. This layer, oh, I'm on the wrong layer there, the hue saturation. I got to go back to the main layer, this folder of teeth. And I'm going to make them all about 50% translucent so I can see the gingiva and I can see where the old teeth are. So I think I can do this with teeth reasonably well. Okay, at least the 6 front teeth. I could certainly move the gingiva up here. I could lengthen to this, and moving this contact area is not that big of a deal. But now let's go through and let's start customizing these teeth just a little bit. Okay, well, how do we do that? All I'm going to do, let's say you want that lateral just a little narrower, a little more petite lateral. Well, it's tooth number 7, so we're going to highlight tooth number 7. And the easiest way to do it with that highlighted is the transform, free transform. I'm going to bring up free transform. Oh, there's 7. Okay, so let's just work on 7 first. No, actually, since I said I was going to work on 10, my fault. Let's work on this one over here. Don't want to do that. Tooth number 10, so highlight number 10, Command or Control T, and that box comes up. And so now maybe I just decide, I'm not going to widen it that much. And we can come back and remeasure these later. Maybe we want to move the gingiva up. Maybe you want to move it down. So up or down arrow, I can kind of position these teeth individually. So I think I can do that. I don't think that's a problem moving the contact if she wanted a little bit fuller laterals. Okay, right there. So I apply Enter. Great. And now I got to do something with tooth number 11. So I highlight tooth number 11. I at least have to move it over. I'm going to use the left arrow and move it over. All right, you can see that we're going to be at this length. We're not really going to be lengthening the canine. And let's just say you still thought it was a little too wide over here. This was a little bit of a problem for you. All right, no problem. Command or Control T, bring up that box again with Command or Control T, and I'm just going to narrow this now visually. Okay, now I've changed the aspect ratio. The aspect ratio didn't stay the same, but I do happen to know that that lateral central or the canine was 80% of the lateral, so I have a little bit of latitude narrowing that. I think that will work pretty good aesthetically. I can make that look a little better. I could now maybe change the gin. Maybe we don't want to go up that much with the gingiva right there. Just we think that that's going to be too much. Okay, great. I'm just going to apply that. Then I come to tooth number 12, and then I use the arrow keys with the move tool highlighted. That's the V, and then I'm just going to move this over to here. And you see, I think we can do that. So we're not going to lengthen that tooth because we're plane of occlusion, but we are going to maybe come about like that. Maybe the gingiva, we don't want to remove quite that much gingiva. Command or Control T to bring up the transform, and I'm just going to bring that down to where I think it's still visually okay. All right, so I think we need to come out just a hair right there. Enter. Now the last tooth, tooth number 13. And you can see since we narrowed the other ones, I need to move this tooth over. All right, great. Maybe to move it up just a little bit. No, that's going to be okay. At any point in time, remember, I can turn off the dupe of the lips and just look at the teeth, and I'll show you that in a second. So yeah, I think I can do that. I don't think that that is going to be a problem to be able to do, certainly without too much tooth damage. I'm going to obviously need to work on the gingiva a little bit. All right, great. So now let's come over to the other side. So what we see, so the other side's tooth number, let's start with tooth number 7. So let's find tooth number 7 right there. I think no, tooth number 7 is okay. I don't have a problem with that. But let's say she wants a little more petite lateral. All right, we could do the same thing over here. Maybe she wants a little more petite, and I think we probably will end up doing something like that for her because she has such petite laterals. All right, let's come back to 10 for just a second. Free transform. I'm going to make that just a teeny bit more petite lateral to kind of go with what she had before. And I still think we're in the range of acceptability. Highlight tooth number 11, and I'm just going to widen 11 then a little bit. Okay, just I think we will be okay if we increase the proportion just a little bit. Tooth number 12. So these are just the little final tweaks that can take a few minutes for you to do. And I think that's going to be okay. Great. Okay, let's come over to the other side here. Tooth number 7. So let's highlight tooth number 7. Command or Control T. I bring up the box around here. Okay, to make a little more petite lateral. I'm liking that a little bit better. Click Enter. And now I got to do something to tooth number 6. So I got to move number 6 over and see that that line is consistent with the contour of her natural tooth there. So I'm going to have to do something there and probably widen the canine just a little bit because to blend in with the bicuspids, because she's a little bit fuller over here, and I think that proportion will be okay. And then let's work on tooth number 5 and bring up the box on it. And so let's improve this just a little bit because I can't narrow that tooth too much. I probably can come in just a little bit on that bicuspid over there. Now, one of the keys on designing teeth, when you get to the canine and go distally, the absolute rule is this tooth just needs to look smaller than this tooth. I know I can give you some percentages and things like that, but it just needs to look smaller. Okay, and right now it does look smaller. I'm going to bring that back up, Command or Control T, and just stretch that just a little bit more to bring out to that height of contour. And I think we're okay there. All right, then let's do tooth number 4, Command or Control T, and bring that up. Now let's say you don't like the rotation. I can rotate this, excuse me, Control as you go backwards, and then with that little arrow, remember we can change the rotation slightly that way. And then we need to come out to about right there for that tooth because we can't come in too much farther than this right here. Great. All right, so we've made what I think will be reasonable adjustments. And I think we're going to need to add just a little bit more to this tooth right here. And it's still smaller than the tooth in front of it visually. All right, now what I'll do at this point is you come back up, highlight the teeth file in the upper right here, take a look at your screen, the upper right, and then I can now look and see how that looks. Now at any point in time I can back out and I can show the patient. Now the patient might say, yeah, that's good, and I still show too much gingiva or something like that. Well, then we got to start talking about what we feel we can safely take away with surgery. Maybe they say, they want a little longer central. So fine, let's zoom in just a little bit. Okay, and let's highlight the centrals. We'll start with tooth number 8, and maybe we like that gingiva there. All right, maybe we want the gingiva down just a little bit. So I'm going to just move that tooth down a pixel at a time. Let's zoom in so you can see what I'm doing. There we go, and I think you can see it now, so I'm just going to come down a little bit. Or if I wanted to change the aspect ratio of that was 80%, but maybe you want a little bit more rectangular shape, Command or Control T, and I'm going to bring that box up, and let's say that you just think you want to come down there just slightly. Again, these are all the little discussions you can have with the patient. All right, now let's zoom back out. All right, now at some point I'll say, then I'll just show, here was before, here's after. So I'd like to lift your gums up a little bit. I'd like to make your centrals a little bit longer at the incisal edge as to blend, and same thing with the laterals. And then now you start to get into the discussion with the patient. And so this is basically how you do it. All right, now let me show you a couple of other little tweaks. All right, so I think that size would look pretty good for her. Still a little excessive gingival display, but I don't think I want to take any more off at this point. All right, so let's now zoom in on this, and I'm going to show you some little tweaks. So let's just say you don't particularly like this shape, or maybe you thought this was too bright back here. I'm going to turn off the picture here so we can just now look at her teeth. Okay, so we can see, and I'm going to zoom in and get some more. All right, right there. Now let's just say you don't like the shape of this, or maybe she says this is too bulbous or something like that. No problem. Two ways to fix that. So this is tooth number 13. We're going to highlight tooth number 13. All right, now two ways I'll show you. One is the edit, warp, and a little box is going to come up around this, or grid, let's say, and I can grab this corner here and I can kind of change that just a little bit. And so you can play around with that. You can do all kinds of interesting things. Maybe you don't want to take the gingiva quite that high, but you want to keep the incisal edge there. So that's how you would individually move an area. So I'll click enter there, and I just brought the gingiva down and I brought that edge in there. So same thing, let's say you didn't want to bring the gingiva here. Tooth number 11, okay, Command or Control T, I could bring it up, and then I can click and go to warp, and let's just say that you decided you wanted to bring this edge in just a little bit to de-emphasize that, okay? You wanted a little bit more of a contour right there. All right, on that tooth. So great, I just did that. So that's how you do it. Free transform is one way to do it. Now the other way to do it, let's go back to tooth number 13, is to use a skill I talked about in another section called liquefy. So with that layer highlighted, it just brought up that tooth, and I'm going to push on the Z so I can zoom, zoom, and I can do little custom shape changes, sorry. All right, with what's called the forward warp tool. This little finger way up here in the left-hand corner. There's my brush size. I can change the brush size up here, upper right, to get a bigger, larger brush, or I can use the bracket keys next to the P. All right, let's just say you want to bring in just and change it. You didn't particularly like that. Maybe you wanted a longer cusp. Maybe you wanted a shorter cusp. Maybe you just wanted to bring the gingiva down. Now the disadvantage of this is I can't see the other layers. This only works on one layer at a time. Click OK, and there's the adjustments. Now, let's say if you say maybe you don't like the color of one particular tooth, one looks a little darker to you. All right, well, how you would do it, then you would highlight that tooth. Let's say tooth number 9. Let's go to tooth number 8, actually. And then with tooth number 8 highlighted, I'm going to go into Image, Adjustments, and do whatever I wanted to do. Now, if there, let's say there was a color balance, you just wanted a little bit less yellow, okay? So I can take out the yellow here, I can go more toward the blue, I can go more yellow, I can do whatever I want to do. So that's possible to do. Let's get out of there for just a second. More than likely what you're going to do, it's usually going to be in a simple adjustment of brightness or chroma. Right? So use saturation, brightness, or chroma. I can go a little brighter with just that tooth. I can go a little darker with that tooth. I can decrease the saturation, a little bit less color, less chroma, increase the brightness, and individually, and just do it one tooth at a time. So again, you highlight the tooth, you go into Image, Image Adjustments, and then look for one of these things, and I would just play with it. You can do all kinds of cool things. Let's say you want to just change the shape of one tooth. She says, you know, Doc, I like this, but you know, it just looks a little too maybe masculine. All right, well, let's work on one tooth then. So we're going to highlight tooth number 9. Again, one way we can just alter tooth number 9, we go transform, warp. It brings up that little grid. So let's just say you want to maybe soften that edge out there. So bring up warp. Let's say that you want to bring in this neck just a little bit. So we can kind of selectively change the shape of the tooth. Maybe create a little bit of a narrowness right there. Maybe soften the embrasure slightly. So there's two ways to do that. One, again, is with the warp, and the other was liquefy. All right, so let's back out. I didn't really change the shape of the tooth. I just kind of changed changed the size of the tooth. I just changed the perception by softening and rounding. Maybe they say this one now. They say, it's just a little too long for me, Doc. No problem. Great. So we bring up the warp. Okay. And excuse me, edit. And I can do transform, free transform, all kinds of fun things. But let's just say that you want to soften, you like a little bit softer lateral incisor. You want to bring up that whole edge. We can grab that line right there. We want to open the embrasure just a little bit, soften that. We want to create a little bit of an S curve here, maybe more, something like that. More like what she had before. Now remember, we can then look through that. Now we're just customizing each of the individual teeth. Great. All right, so now let's just say we got a smile she likes. Just, Doc, that's what I like. Okay, and then of course you got to be careful what you promise, because you know this is just a digital representation. Now, how do we measure from here? So let's turn back on with her lips on, lips off. She likes that. Great. And I think we can do that. You show her kind of before and after. And I really would like to lengthen the centrals just a little bit myself. All right, but let's just say that's what she ends up with. She ends up with more with a look like this. But maybe if she agrees, well, how would you lengthen the centrals? Okay, I would go to tooth number 9, free transform. And we'll grow this a little bit so you can see. All right, so I'd like to have maybe a little bit more positive curvature right there, just as a thought. So we'll do that, apply that. Let's go to tooth number 8, free transform. And let's lengthen that. Okay. So now what I found about doing this, I used to use other programs, presentation programs, and draw lines years and years ago, and those are good things to do. But if you know Photoshop, and you got to know a little bit about Photoshop, you can see how we can custom tweak lots of little things here very quickly. That hopefully we can get patient to agree to something and go to the next level. All right, now, so this is maybe an agreed on step number 1 before we go to step number 2, which is doing a wax up and then some sort of aesthetic prototype or mock-up. But let's say now we want to measure. Fine. All right, so I'm going to turn this off here, and let's zoom in here, right here. And what we're going to do now, again, is we're going to take these teeth and make them 50% translucent so we can see through there, about 50%. So let's zoom in some more. I'm going to zoom really in real close so you can see. All right. Now what we can see is here's the edge of the old tooth underneath here. Let's just zoom in on this central. Here is the new gingival proposed position. All right, now how do we measure? All right, I happen to know I measured this tooth. It is 9.5 millimeters exactly. She wants it a little bit longer at the incised ledge and maybe a little gingiva up there. All right, so let's create that conversion factor. We talked about that before. And how are we going to measure? In Photoshop, what we can do is we're going to turn on the measuring tool. It's hidden in the eyedropper tool. Let's look in the upper left, and I'm going to click on the ruler tool. With the ruler activated, let's look up here. You see width and height. I'm going to measure, let's turn off this first, let's measure her tooth. All right, so we're going to come from right here, and we're going to click and hold down the shift key so I can draw a vertical line. I'm going to go right to there, and that tells me that's 51 pixels. Let's look up here, 151 pixels in the height. It's measuring in pixels. Great, I'm going to come over here, and I'm going to clear this out. I'm going to put in 151, was I right on that? Short-term memory problems these days as you get older. 151, and divide that by the actual length of the tooth, 9.5, okay? And then I'm going to write this down somewhere. So essentially, 15.9, if we want to round to 16 pixels, is 1 millimeter. So 16 pixels represents 1 millimeter on this tooth. All right, so let's turn back on then our teeth here. And so that was 16 pixels. So let's go remeasure from here. We're going to do this and measure right to the old gingiva to where the new gingiva is going to be, and that's a little over 16. So we're probably, let's say we're lengthening 3/4 to 1 millimeter there. Okay. All right, let's come down to the incised edge. We'd write that down somewhere. So that's what we would do our initial wax up to. Let's come over here, and we'll measure. Here's the edge of the old tooth I'm looking through. And hold down the shift key, and let's see, that is now 19.6. That's a little over a millimeter. So I like teeth around 11 millimeters as a good starting point. Certainly they don't always end up that way, sometimes longer, sometimes shorter. She's starting with 9.2, so we're talking about adding roughly about 2 millimeters total to her tooth, which could end up being a little long, but we'll try it out, okay? All right, now I would do the same thing at the lateral. So let's go over here. Let's hold down the shift key. I'll do this a little faster to about right there is where the gingiva needs to move from. So 39, so we divide 39 into 16 and we come up with about 2.3 millimeters, 2.4 roughly. So we know we want to come up about here. That's where we'd wax to and then it maybe eventually cut to. Now, I can use that same conversion factor, the 15.9 or 16 millimeters as a millimeter equals pixels equals a millimeter on these two, but as we start to go around the corner and things get smaller, we can't, because this is a different perspective. Back here, 16 pixels is more than a millimeter, okay? All right, so usually each individual tooth at the canine, I'll make an individual measurement. So what did we do? We measured the canine in the real world. The actual length of the canine was 9.2 millimeters. All right, so let's now measure. Let's turn this off here, and just real quickly, we would let's measure the length of this. Hold down the shift key so we draw a vertical line. Okay, and then I can just visualize across there. That's the correct length. Let's come up here. We'll round up to 137 pixels. Looking up here where I'm circling up here. All right, so 137. All right, now I said the length was 9.2, not between 9.2 and 9.3. All right, so 137 was the pixels length divided by, let's say, 9.25. It's probably more accuracy than you need, so it's 14.8 pixels. So you can see a pixel difference as we go around the corner. Maybe not such a big deal, but certainly would be a big deal by the time you got back to the bicuspid. So the point is, I'll measure each tooth as I go distally and create its own conversion factor by measuring by dividing what the actual length is into what the digital measured length in pixels is, and that will give me a number that'll tell me how many pixels is 1 millimeter. All right, great. So what we just found was, what was our number right there? 14.8 is 1 millimeter digitally. So let's just remeasure this to here. I can look through there and we see 28 pixels, so we're lengthening this 2 millimeters. Here, let's come down, so we make a note that we want a crown length 2 millimeters. We'd start with wax first, of course. Try it in with a mock-up, and let's measure here. And we're going to bring this edge down, initially 7 pixels, so a half a millimeter. So we're adding a half a millimeter at the incisal edge, or the cuspid, taking 2 millimeters away from up here. All right, so that's how we do it. We'll just go along. We know the actual length of our first bicuspid is 8.1 millimeters, and so that we would measure again in pixels from here to whatever that was, and then make that division, and that would tell us, let's say it was 13 pixels is 1 millimeter, and then we can again measure from here to here, and then we can be very exact in our measurements. And so that's how I measure in Photoshop. This is really the main technique that I use to do a full Photoshop smile design. Okay, we've done sort of tweaking the size of the teeth. Now let me show you a couple of ways that you might want to tweak just the color a little bit. Maybe you don't like this, it's too bright. Maybe you want to bring back a little bit more of the original color. How can we do that? And I'll show you a little trick over here. We're going to turn back on. We need to highlight this layer of the teeth you see in the upper right, this folder, where it's called group. And we're going to add a color balance adjustment layer. So look down here to the bottom. You'll see a little icon. It says create a fill or adjustment layer. We're going to click on that and look for color balance and click on color balance, and that now just added an adjustment layer here that I can adjust the color of what's just in this folder. And again, the teeth are in here without changing this other layer, the layer that's underneath it. Okay, so let's just say that you feel like you want a little yellow back in there. Obviously not that much, but a little bit more believable than you were creating. Let's zoom out, so Command or Control 0, and we can see now, turn that on and off, that little adjustment on and off, and maybe that's a little bit more believable about what you think you can do or what your ceramics can do. All right, so I'll leave that in the file and I'll give that to you too. If you want to open back up, you just click on this little icon right here, double click, and maybe you want more green, maybe you want more blue. Obviously you're not going to do something like that, but you have the ability to play with this a little bit. Now, great, we'll close that back down. Now if you want to do just one tooth, you don't want to change the color of the group, you highlight the tooth, click on that, on the tooth, highlight that layer, go into image adjustments, and then you would adjust it that way. Bring up the same type of menu, but you just apply the adjustment to the tooth. Now watch, I'll just turn a tooth blue. We're not going to do that. Let's undo that. We'll just click cancel, but let's just say that you wanted to do that. Or maybe you wanted to darken. Maybe you thought tooth number 13 was a little bit too bright, too much light in there. Image, adjustment, brightness. Okay, and then I can turn this tooth black back there if I wanted to. Tooth number 13, is it? Yeah, there we go. It's black. Well, I don't really want it black, but maybe I thought it was just a little bit too bright. I didn't think I could create that. I could darken that individually. So these are all little individual tweaks you can do. And I can show, again, lips on, lips off. So that's how I would do individual adjustments of color. Well, I could do it as a group, color balance, like I just showed you, or I can do it individually through the image adjustment menu. Well, we've talked about how we do a smile design and bring teeth in, and talked about in this particular case where we probably do a little crown lengthening to gain a little length of the gingiva, but also at the incisal edge. But what if we had a situation where maybe we need to cover up the root or something like that? Our roots weren't exactly where we wanted to be. So what it did is it created a slightly different situation here. Like, let's say this is a preoperative situation where we put the teeth now where we wanted to, and we could see now we'd like the gingiva, but now we've got a problem. We don't have enough gingiva over here. Previously, we were going to take away gingiva. Well, how would we do that? So I actually did that digitally just to show you something. The easiest way is a tool I showed you in another section, is to use the liquify tool. So we can move gingiva around. All right, but the first thing we want to do is always duplicate what our original situation is. Let's assume this is our original situation. It isn't, but let's assume it was. So here is this layer underneath here. I'm going to just turn this off so you can see. So let's say that's our original situation that we brought in. We now brought in our teeth. We decided we liked teeth there, but we need to alter the gingival situation. Well, we're going to do this on this particular layer, but we'll make a copy of it. So Command or Control J. So let's say this was original, Command or Control J. And now I'll have the original underneath, but I'm going to make the change on this layer. All right, so we know we need to bring gingiva down here, over here, and maybe do some root coverage or something like that. All right, so how are we going to do that first digitally? So we'll highlight this layer. I'll go up into the Filter menu, and I'm going to click on Liquify. And the layer that I have highlighted or selected comes up. All right, now we're going to need to zoom in. I'll push on the Z key, and I'm going to zoom in on the area I want to work on. And so let's just say, well, we had some distorted situation. Maybe it was an old implant, and we just want to put new gingiva over here. All right, so I've zoomed in, and then I'm going to go to this tool up here called the Forward Warp tool. The hotkey is W. Click on that, and I'll drag my cursor over here, and you can see that circle is the size of the brush. I can change the brush up in the upper right here, real quick like that, or I can use the keys to the right of the P key. So look at the P key, the left bracket, and the right bracket. So let's find about the size we want. So what we're going to do is bring our gingiva down. We're going to simulate some root coverage here. So I'm going to try and put back what I think should be there, and then we can measure this the same way we measured teeth before. And then let our surgeon know and or the patient know what may or may not be possible. Okay, that's about what we'd like our gingiva to look like. Something like that will be under our teeth, obviously. So again, sort of reshaping or simulating if we added tissue here. All right, I don't know, bring that down just a little bit. So that's where maybe we'd like to have a little tissue, a little bit of distortion here. Well, there's other ways we can correct things, but it's very time consuming. All right, so I'm just going to click OK and take a look at that underneath there. Now we're pretty good. Maybe we want to cover up just a little bit more here. So we go back to the Liquify tool, Filter Liquify. That layer will come up, and I got to grow it again back to where I want, and use the same tool I just used and bring that in just a little bit. Now, I don't really like that reflection up there, but that was just what was there. Okay, great. All right, so that's about what we'd like to have. All right, there we go. Now let's zoom back out. Now I can show her, I could say, well, this is what your gingiva looked like before. I'm going to like this, excuse me, I'll zoom in so you can see a little better. Let's zoom right here in close, and I can show, here's the before situation. What I'd like the surgeon to do is do that. So we're going to try and do that root coverage surgically, and then do teeth like this. And we've already talked about how to manipulate teeth. Okay, and that was how I would show the patient really what we're going to do. Now in a second, I'm going to have a chapter here on how do we present to the patient.